Okay, we're live with that funny little music. Hey, hi, hello, Niels. I'm Ryan Erickson. Who cares? We are here, News from the Beta World, our new name for this lovely live stream that we do. How do we say we are proponents and champions of the organizational renaissance toward decentralization, federalization, and democratization of organizations throughout the world. So,
and we have done so with podcasting for 2 years, almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. I think this May will be 3 years. We're episode 84 right now.
Yes.
Have gone through many different iterations of of presentation and graphics and topics and things like that.
So many topics, of course, and quite a few guests, but usually they were from not so directly related to the BetaCodex network, and this time it's different, right? With our guest today.
This time's because our special guest today is a real practitioner, a longtime friend of yours, I know, and collaborator and software developer. That would be Andreas Schlegel. Hello, Andreas.
Hello.
Hi, Andreas. Good to have you finally on this podcast.
Yes, finally.
Finally. And so a lot of stuff happening with you as a software developer and with TOS, and I know you are a deep practitioner now. That the past has been, what now, 7 months since the release of TOS, to put that into the world. And since our audience has not yet learned about who you are and why you are important to the beta movement, I would love it if you would say a few things about yourself in 30 to 60 seconds.
No, let's give it a little more. Let's give it.
Give him a little more.
Things to tell for Andreas to tell.
All right.
Yeah. So yes, I think I do a lot of different stuff in my professional work. So first of all, I'm a kind of an entrepreneur. So in different roles, I think actually also one of my software related role here is I'm the CTO of Comenius, our beta related learning platform. And I think also in that collaboration together with Niels, we actually had a kind of an inspirational connection, bringing also TOS to life, to actually think about, okay, how can software development work completely different? Let's say.
How did you get in touch with beta?
Yeah, that's also kind of interesting. I think it was somewhere in 2017, 18, I think, where we had the first contact in my former role as manager or director of my family business, let's say like this, in the electronic industry. That's also where I'm originally based. So I once studied electrical engineering. I always had a kind of a heart in the software part of it. And
you're a geek. You're a geek.
Yes. I think it's true, Niels. Yes. I'm definitely not a geek. Yeah, a little bit, to be honest. And I think that software was I think I just thought about it some weeks ago. I think I was something like 6 or 7 years old when my father once had the first Commodore computer, where I also started to programming on BASIC. And I still know it. My first program was a kind of a rocket starting from the bottom left to the top right of the screen. So as a child.
The fact that you started programming on a Commodore machine in BASIC tells me that you are somewhere near the vintage or age of Niels and I. So that's
not quite. He's a bit younger, right?
Okay.
How old are you? 40 something, right?
Yeah, 44.
44.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to get you to reveal your age, but since you
no, that's fine. That's okay. We crossed the mark of 50, both of us, but Andreas is still young. Let's put it.
Okay. Well, cool.
At least in my heart.
Exactly.
The heart of youth. Okay, well,
Yeah.
why don't you get into it?
Just a second. I think we need to reveal this connection with Beta a little further. So you were director of that your family's business, a company that your father co-founded.
Yes.
And you took over as a general manager or director in 2012.
12.
Mm-hmm. And then in 2019, we met in 2018, I think.
Yes.
When Sick and I had just created OpenSpace Beta, and you were there in our very first workshop about OpenSpace Beta, related to OpenSpace Beta.
Yeah, the soft opening of the studio.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we kind of couldn't believe it. Oh my God, there's a potential client here. There's somebody who wants to transform his company to Beta, and so you did.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was for me. It was kind of a really nice situation that I started to think about. Okay, how can we get to that Beta organization? And exactly to that time, I think, if I remember correctly, some weeks before we had this workshop, I realized that there is this brand new book called OpenSpace Beta. And I ordered it, and as I was on the way to the studio to have this first personal contact to Silke and Niels, I read the book, and I thought about it. Okay, it was really, really interesting because it was the first kind of a change approach that is consequently using the same patterns and the same principles that we want to achieve with Beta. And so for me, it was obvious after reading the book that this is the approach we have to take, because it was a kind of a completely different approach how to change a complete organization. And it's not it's also very fast, not having years of so-called transformation. So that was the actual start.
That was 7 years ago, first semester of 2019. Your company, 140 people, adopted a health structure design. You did the decentralization, adopted the relative target approach, everything. And since then we have been in touch and kind of working together in ever-changing roles. And now you are the CTO of Comenius, and also a Toast associate.
Correct. Yeah, it's also a kind of my professional work, kind of on a daily basis, to work in different software projects in different roles as software architect, also in very big and international projects. So I also was kind of a little bit frustrated, to be honest, as Niels contacted me and told me, "Hey, we have invented this Toast thing," and I just read the draft of the paper, and it was really a little bit kind of self-embarrassing for me. That is, okay, why we only have this idea now, or Niels had it, because it was so obvious for me, and I think all the pains of the agile theater, it's a kind of a daily thing in my life, in my professional life, to see the actual problems or things that are just not working. And so I was very happy, as Niels said, do you want to join the Toast?
Yes. We finally cracked the riddle. I think I said something like that, right?
Yes.
We finally cracked the riddle. I should mention and disclose also here that you inspired time-oriented software development, Andreas, because before we worked together on the Comenius platform, I hadn't so much seen software developers doing the work, let's say. Not that I observe your coding. I do not look over your shoulder when you do the coding, of course, but it gave Silke and I developed Comenius, and once you started taking over the architecture and programming and all the stuff related to developing the platform, and we had these conversations about how you proceeded with the work and the problems that you encountered, and that gave it was an important impulse, as you know, because I noticed, okay, so why does Andreas not need a software development team?
Yes.
Why can he do so many things by himself or always in pairs, all by himself or in pairs? Because we had these collaborators, friends, colleagues contributing, of course, so you didn't do the work alone, but still there was no need for a team, strangely. And also I remember that when we had the original platform developed in Croatia by a Croatian developer, and when we took it over, there were many things that you said that riddled you, that you found them strange and difficult, and you had never done certain things. But then a few months later, you had done it.
Yes.
And there was no AI involved at the time, by the way. So you just got into it and solved so many problems and created so many new features. And so that gave me the impulse. Oh my God, if that is possible, if this guy, Andreas, can do so many things, there must be something wrong with all the backlogs and dev teams and with Scrum as a whole.
Yeah, and even, or especially if I have to mention that I'm definitely not the best software developer in the world, so definitely not. So there are a lot of guys outside in the software development world that are definitely better software developer. But yeah, I think to do the things differently and not to spend time in useless things and rituals and so on is maybe a good starting point.
And there's another aspect, maybe you do not remember it as I do, but sometimes Silke and I would have a call with you about certain features, a bunch of features really, and sometimes the next day you would ask us to test it. That left a deep impression on me. So we had discussed a completely new feature for the Comenius platform, and so we kind of discussed what the options were. You sometimes had an opinion about where to go or which way to go with that feature, and then the next day we would test it. And that was definitely an inspiration for time-oriented software development. So that from one day, it certainly inspired me to look at the Weichselbaum system, which we also have to talk about today a little bit. How can software be developed within a day? Item by item. That was very inspiring for me.
So one thing that has come to me in terms of getting to know Toz and kind of seeing how it has come into the world and have been born, I have to admit I had been trained and indoctrinated in Scrum for many years and come to believe that was the way to do it. That was how you become agile, for whatever the hell that means. And there are some little parallels that kind of rhyme with Scrum in Toz, but there's a lot that's really fundamentally different. So I'd like to hear first from Niels, from you, about what project or what exposure did you have to Scrum before saying this stuff sucks and there's a better way and I know what that is. Would you care to share a little bit about that? And then I'll ask Andreas you the same question.
Yes. I think Andreas has maybe much more relationship to it as a developer. So, but my first contact with Scrum was probably in 2006 when my brother told me, Niels, you're doing this beyond budgeting thing, which we now call the BetaCodex. And he said, what you, Niels, are doing with organizations, we do the same with software, because he at the time developed software for telephones, for mobile phones. Basically. So he said, I just had this Scrum qualification, and it's really related, isn't it? This Scrum thing and the beta thing. Today we know better, of course, but at the time it seemed very, very similar, and at the time, with the rise of the Agile movement, I spoke at many software developers conferences. I consulted with a lot for tech firms from the beginning. From 2003, I consulted to tech firms as well, for software firms. So yeah, I had contacts all the time. But still, now there's more, because we have this company, Comenius, that is a software company. There are so many people in my environments, not just Andreas, who develop software. So over the time, I became more and more critical of Scrum, of course, seeing it fail more and more, which I think 20 years ago wasn't so common. So yeah, and I was, for the last couple of years, I was looking for something better and hadn't found it. Only last year that happened. We will get to that in a moment, I think. Andreas, what's your history with Scrum and Agile?
Yeah, so I think it's for me, as I'm not originally born in the software industry, it was something like, okay, I heard, or I recognized it a little bit from the side stage, from more that engineering work where I come from, developing electronic systems and something like that. And still there, it's also it's more hardware bound development work, of course. And there I started to think about, okay, how can we approach kind of, or use kind of principles, doing things more flexible, getting faster, kind of the next iteration, how we call it, prototype level, and the next prototype, where you actually have to order things, where you need others to produce something before you can actually do your prototyping. And I think that was where I just realized, okay, there's something like Agile and Scrum and so on. And in my roles then in the software industry, as architect, as also software developer, consultant, I think, it was to that time already a kind of a standard. So everybody said, or is still saying, we are doing a kind of Agile thing. What I realized very fast is that it's actually almost every time a kind of an Agile theater, because it's kind of just steering, it's planning, and we do a kind of, so one thing is Scrum, but I'm also working and have worked in context where we did things that are even worse, something like SAFe and so on. So where you have release plans, PI plannings, and whatever, a lot of planning things, and still that way of distinguishing between implementation and creating something like concepts, call it user stories or whatever. And that stuff was very complicated. It took a long time, a lot of different states, do whatever, of user stories and so on, and a lot of overhead. Of course, you need a Scrum Master, you need that role and this role. And for me, it never felt something like lean or fast. It was just like a bureaucratic thing. That's kind of my experience with that Scrum and so on tools.
Okay, so then talking about that and imagining one of the pieces of TOS, and one of the, I would say, the heresies of TOS, as you're the heretic of here, Niels, is the idea that there's no such thing as a software development team. The software is not developed in teams. Scrum is foundationally about the team, and what is the team about, and the cross functionality and all the stuff that has arisen from that. So, and again, I'll go to you, Andreas. Is that, what was your experience in that, all this bureaucracy and this people getting in the way in the team environment? How did that feel when you got into TOS and doing a time-oriented software development approach?
So I think the term team is somehow very interesting, especially also when we somehow look into the beta definition of a team versus a group. In beta, we say a team is a constellation of people that are creating things together, where you really do things that you can sell. And when you think about the software development teams, okay, we have whatever percent developers, and maybe we have some other roles or people inside, because actually they are roles, but actually it's different people. So we have a Scrum Master, and maybe we have an architect or whatever. but actually it's a group of people that should develop software, but they do not develop anything together. Yeah. At the end, the actual coding is in reality in 99% or 98% of the cases, it's done by one person. So things like pair programming, I rarely saw in practice, yeah, because it's too expensive. That's exactly
supposedly. That's a stupidity. Yeah. Supposedly, it's too expensive.
Yes, yes. So the actual software development at the end is done by one person, or ideally in a team somehow of two people, a really team that are working together on the same problem. And you have somebody who could be the same person, but it's a rarely case, who also somehow did the kind of the concept. And in the reality, I would say there is almost every time of the cases where we have a problem during that software programming process, it's not about the programming problem. Yeah, of course you have to debug and whatever, but this is just, yeah, you have to do that. Yeah, but the actual problems came across, and when you talk about, okay, what should we actually do in detail? What's the concept actually? What do we should deliver really? Okay, is the concept or the user story, yeah, in that case, is it really actually describing what we need to deliver? And that is a thing where we have all this planning and a lot of things, a lot of people discussing user stories before you actually do it in the iteration backlog. And still the 50%, 30% of the really important questions rise, and when you are already doing it, it's too late. And that caused problems like, okay, we cannot achieve our deliverables in the iteration. We have to extend it. We have to take it over to the next. So that is what I realized. And I thought, when we now switch to Toast, yeah, one of the really great ideas is that taking that okay point concept from Ernst Weichselbaum's Weichselbaum system, and put it between where we create concepts to the actual implementation work. Yeah. Because and that with that handshake, that is a kind of a really important, in another language it's quality gate. Yeah. So you should, as a developer, never take an item where you read the concept and I have actually here no clue how to do it. Then it's not a ready to go concept. Yeah, then you cannot take it.
Well, I mean, what you're describing here is one of the biggest things I always heard in Scrum teams and talking with other Scrum masters is that it's the shitty product owner factor.
Yes,
that they don't put the stuff. They don't. Again, many of them don't know the technical details of the code, or they have a poor understanding of the requirement, and then just say, "Oh, here's as much as I know." And again, you're the smart person. You're the developer. So I'm gonna shove it over the wall. This is the batch. We're gonna have the stuff in the big giant backlog of every conversation I've had. We're gonna turn it into this batch of stuff in the sprint backlog. And okay, you're gonna take the top one on the list and you're gonna figure that one out. And maybe we'll work together, but there's no idea of this. I think that the big thing in Toast is the handshake, is the seam, is the conversation that you as a developer can say, this is not ready for me. This is not ready. That go back to the user, and I am not going to start on this as an agreement. So hearing you talk about that and reading the paper and the patterns, that to me felt like this is how beta really applies to software development, and it's a beautiful thing. So,
do you want to explore on the okay point, Andreas, a little bit more about the distinction between conceptualization and realization?
Yeah. So I think the thing is, when we talk about concept, that's also something I think what's really worth to mention when we think about or talk about Toast is when people are talking about concepts. A lot of people have the kind of images in their brains that, okay, it's a big thing. a concept is a big thing, and we need days or weeks to create concepts because it's a big and very hard thing to do. But actually, it is not. Yeah, because actually it's just the work in doing it. And if you think about to create a concept, which should be in a way that one or two person actually can bring that concept into a live working software product or feature or element, artifact, whatever. Yeah, it's nothing really big. Yeah, and I think that is also one thing with that different roles. Yeah, not everybody who's able to develop a software is able to conceptualize it. Yeah, and it's a kind of a different job. Yeah, and you have to learn it. It's typically also kind of a more senior work. Yeah, and you need a little bit more experience, and you have to know what to do, and you have to mastery. You really also have to understand, let's say, the overall architecture, the overall product, where we are, the context in that you are working. And when you create a concept and you're actually doing it, there you really will stumble upon your open questions regarding the requirements. Because if you're actually doing really a good concept and you want to do a good concept because you know I have to hand it over, and also the guy I want to hand it over can reject it, you really have to do it good. And then if you are in that detail, you realize, oh, there is this edge case. I never thought about it. Maybe I have to talk to the customer, to whomever is in that case, my people, my person to talk to, but I have to do it. Yeah. Because otherwise the concept will be just flawed and nobody will accept it. So I think, again, this should be done in every software development work, as in every product development work. But I think the actual beauty in the OK point is that there's a kind of a natural just point where the quality here already gets proved. Yeah, because when you're a developer, when you're a realizer, and you know, okay, I take this item and I have to deliver it this afternoon, this evening. I only will take it when I know, okay, I know exactly what to do. I have understood what to do, and I know I'm able to do it. Yeah, of course, there is a little thing where you never know, but in general, you know, okay, I'm able to do it. I have enough mastery. I know what to deliver. And if there's something unclear, you will never accept it because you will be the person, oh, I have to raise my hand and say, okay, I am not done. Yeah. And that's a kind of a thing that you are not solving the actual problems of bad concepts with Toast. But the system is built in a way to make that problems visible. Yeah. And the Toast system with that daily rhythm is constantly every day delivering the problems to your organization. It's very, very much harder to cover problems.
To discover them or to cover them up?
To cover them up. Yeah,
to hide them.
Okay. To hide them. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Because you conceptualize and there's a quality gate, so to speak, in technical terms, at the OK point, and the realizers have the quality gate at the end of the day, each day, right? When they deploy the item to the live software. Yeah. Yeah. What you explained very well, Andreas, is that there is a matter of honor involved.
Yes.
A concept must be good so that it can meet the needs of the realizer at the OK point, and it's a matter of honor for realizers to deploy the finished item at the end of the day. A maximum of 2 or 3 days, right? Because items might be 1-day items, 2-day items, or 3-day items, and that also needs to be clear at the OK point. Yeah. So quality is embedded in the process. Very good. And I think you also explained well that in Toast the conversation is about the actual work and not some lofty ideas of work.
Yes, about the actual items. Yeah. What do we have to do? It's not about, okay, how many story points can we put in the next iteration?
Yes.
How many story points is this user story? Yeah, this is a kind of I was part of discussions where 3 people discussed almost half an hour about the question: is this user story 3 or 5 story points?
Yeah. All waste. Yes. The idiocy of story points. Yes, well put. It's an idiotic thing. Yeah, all the estimation, the story point writing, the user story myth, the backlog mess, because so much. There's another quality gate we might mention, that every list owner is responsible for only letting items on the list that can be conceptualized. So that's another quality gate. From the list to conceptualization, from conceptualization at the OK point, from conceptualization to realization. So a list owner, this is part of the patterns paper, of course, needs to clear the list of rubbish and cannot let unsolvable items for conceptualizers to stand on the list, at least high up on the list.
Well, that to me that sounds like there's an OK point between the world and the list, kind of.
Yeah.
This is one of the things I think is really important to identify. Well, what is different between TOS and Scrum in terms of, in Scrum we have a product backlog and we have a product goal and we have sprint goals, and but you have a list and you have a list owner. Well, what's the distinction between that, and how is TOS different? So I can intuit that, because how the list owner takes pride and responsibility for not letting anything on the list that is not ready to make available for developers, for conceptualizers and or realizers to choose from the list and do the work with. You're grimacing there, so I want to make sure I'm getting a correction on that. So it's what I'm talking about: the list and the ownership of the list, and how that stuff gets from the wild to the list through the list owner and into realization, right? So that's, for me, that's a different process than Scrum. And I think
I'd like to say that TOS has nothing to do with Scrum. It's nothing. There are no similarities. But of course, if you are contaminated by Scrum thinking, you will think that it must be similar. The list must be
infected.
Yeah, exactly. Andreas, do you want to answer a little bit about this question?
Yeah, so I think the question how are getting, let's say, real problems or parts of a problems to a list, or first of all, it's important to mention that a list can only be in the world if there is a problem and it's clear what is the problem, and that's the baseline of a list. Yeah, we need a really important problem, because otherwise we don't need a list for it. And a list is also nothing like a backlog, because it should come to an end. Yeah, so there should be a point in time where a list is empty and we can close it. Yeah, it's done. And so we are not organizing and thinking like, okay, we have an endless backlog where just everybody who has any problem, idea, or whatever just creates an item and throws it inside, calls it user story or whatever. Yeah. So we really have to distinguish, okay, we now have a problem and we need to solve it. Okay, to which list in regards of problem does it fit? And then the process itself, I think, is also very specific also to the kind of the way how that company that is running TOS is actually doing what is a kind of business model. So, for example, if you talk about Pflaeging, yeah, it's a company that is developing its own software. Yeah, so naturally, the problems that they are discussing, the list they are opening, and the items they are creating, this process is differently. If you're a company where you develop software for other companies, where you maybe get requirements from let's say externals, where you also, as you mentioned, the adding items to a list is a kind of an okay point also between different organizations. Yeah. So there are the details of the process and what things you have to think about, and also what kind of a let's say a checklist or things you have to check before you actually create an item, can be different, of course. Yeah, I think this is an easy thing to understand. If you build your own software in your own company, you will do it differently if you are a kind of a service company that is developing software for other clients. Yeah.
But still, the list owner will say, okay, this is the list, or these are the lists that we are running. So does this requirement, this need, fit on one of the lists? Otherwise, we cannot do it. And if it fits on a list, how to size it into
Yes.
into portions, into daily portions, basically, into items that have the right size to get worked on in a TOS system. So they can be 1-day portions, 2-day items, 3-day items, and every list owner must have in mind, we like in the new paper we say a list owner must love the problem and must want to get solved, and also must take care that the items, as they have names on that list, right? That they have a reasonable size, so that they can be conceptualized by conceptualizers without them discovering, oh, this is not one item, this should be 5 items, right? That's not a good thing. So the list owner must be capable of imagining, what kind of size is this really an item? Then the conceptualizer will decide if it's a 1-day item, a 2-day item, a 3-day item, but there must be some logic behind it already. Andreas? Right?
Well,
we have Dr. M.
Yeah, well, I would hop in there. But yeah, we have a comment from Dr. M. I'd like to put it out there. Problem exists only if there is a defined standard. Is that the definition we're talking about?
Not sure what that is, defined standard. Yeah. Do you know what it is, Ryan or Andreas?
I'm
trying. The problem is that it would be like a business problem, or what we usually call a project.
Yes.
That constitutes a list, and the list should exhaust itself after maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. So any list should be conceived already with this in mind. Is this a business problem that we want to tackle? Is this something that we want to do for 2 weeks, 3 weeks approximately? Because you do not fix that time of the list. The list exhausts itself, but you do not estimate or negotiate or plan when it will. You have a guess, probably.
Right.
You would say,
and if you,
but then you also will have an idea. Okay, there might be 50 items maybe on the list, and that person, able to do this estimation and close to the problem should be the list owner as well, And
so Andrea? Again, so there's, well, I want to hop in there. One thing, just as I'm developing an understanding, if every item on the list is a 1-day piece, right? That has been defined.
3-day piece, Max,
1 to 3 day piece defined by a list owner. Again, that is a big shift from whatever other methodology, because usually it's like, oh, the list owner says, oh, here's 10,000 things I want. You figure out how long they take, blah, blah, blah. But this means, okay, I am responsible. I am accountable for these things being small enough to complete in a day, and that's a huge lift. That requires a level of mastery from the list owner that's not always there in these other environments. So if we think if it's 1 to 2 to 3 days, and we got, okay, that means there's 5 items per week, or depending on how many people you've got to work, that's like 10 weeks.
Beautiful how you described it. You just described it very well, I think, Ryan, that in the usual software development approaches, you authorize the wrong people to do certain jobs.
Yeah.
List owner must be
master. That is, I think, this is one part from my perspective to that story. But the other part is, let's assume we have a situation where you started and you have a list owner and you see he's creating items, and then a conceptualizer wants to take an item and read it. And then he said, oh, okay, I can never do this in 1 or 2 or 3 days. It's too big. So there's again this need, okay, we have to talk to each other, and then they will talk about it and say, okay, let's split it up into 2 or 3 items. Yeah. So it's also kind of a thing that in that system you have actually the learning by actually doing the work. It's not something like separated. We are sending people to trainings, talk about how do I create the perfect user story? How do I estimate or whatever? Yeah, it's actually doing in the work. And you also, again, have this kind of a collaboration and handover where a conceptualizer then takes an item or want to take it and realize reading it in 10 minutes, okay, it can never be done in 3 days. Yeah.
Actually,
and then there's the time.
Shouldn't take it on, right? There's a holy principle. Yes. We haven't discussed it much, but it's a Weichselbaum principle. The river only flows in one direction. So a conceptualizer should not start to conceptualize an item and then discover it's 3 items or 5 or 17 and send it back to the list owner. That should never happen. The river only flows in one direction, right? The same goes for the OK point and the gate between conceptualization and realization.
Well, right? You're getting right into one of the core items that I love about TOS, again, reading about it and being excited about it, is talk to each other applies it all the way down the river. Yes. If you as a listener, I want to talk, if I'm putting something on the list, I need to talk with the folks who are getting me in the problem. And there's a conversation between the conceptualizer and the listener. Oh, that's not ready. We're not ready to put this item in the boat to sail it on. And those conversations, it's not like you have to wait 2 weeks for a
There's no reason to wait.
Or a backlog meeting or whatever. Just wait. You got to have commitment and accountability and responsibility to get the stuff happening in the list and to talk to each other immediately and have real conversations. If you're connected in a beta cell, you have the social density to be able to have conversations that are good and deep and mastery, that decision-based mastery in a cell, to have the conversations and good conversations so you can get items that are well refined to a 1 to 2 day portion. So that's, again, it's different.
Andreas?
Yeah, maybe I think this, as you just framed it, okay, inside a beta cell, we have this social density thing, and I don't want to say that's wrong. Of course, that's right. Yeah, but even if you don't have a cell situation, if you're just having a kind of a software development department or something like that, and you're doing TOST, the thing is about TOST also that you only can do TOST if you have that kind of authorization from any level above, let's say, the formal authorization that we are working with TOST and with that principles. And it's the actual authorization and also not the authorization. It's also kind of you have to do it. You must talk to each other because otherwise it cannot work. Yeah. And I think it's very natural things between humans. So if you realize you have a problem, you talk to your peers about it. It's something that our different systems, organizations are constantly trying to stop. Yeah, we have our escalation path. We have to wait for the daily. We have to wait for the next whatever artifact meeting to actually talk about the problems. Yeah. And the idea of TOST is exactly in that moment, when you realize we have a problem here or I have a problem, then you have to talk to each other with whomever. It's something like, okay, that then everybody knows, okay, when we talk about this problem, I know I have to talk to Niels because he has a kind of a mastery about this topic. In the other case, when I have a different problem, maybe I have to talk to somebody else. And it's actually about
TTEO is a little bit like it's also it's related to an idea at Toyota, which is the famous end-on cord, that when you have a problem on the shop floor and on the production line, that you can pull the end-on cord and stop the whole line so that you can work out the problem at this moment and you do not delay it to any meeting or committee or so. It's not delegated. So it's in a way it's similar. TTEO is like the end-on cord. I think that's a nice metaphor. There's so many ideas in TOST that come from Toyota, that come from the Weichselbaum system, from quick response manufacturing as well, from Ian Glanday's Lean RFS. So we borrowed a lot of stuff, right? Or let's say a lot of stuff in TOST is already proven by those concepts. It has this underpinning. Yeah. Does this make sense? Andreas, I remember when I told you about TOS the first time and I mentioned the OK point and how we would use it, you said, what the fuck? Why didn't I have this idea? Something.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because you know the Weichselbaum system so well as I do.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You also met the guy. So we are, Andreas and I, we once went to visit Ernst Weichselbaum together, right? That was a memorable.
That was great. Yeah.
Getting into our next episode a little bit. So, so how do these things? What got in the paper, in the new paper, the patterns of time-oriented software development, from what we're talking about here today? Again, we're speaking kind of the level of the three of us know what TOST is, and we kind of have these ideas, and so to give an idea of what's in the paper, I'll say so. Niels, for you first, what did you have to get into the paper? So why did this paper need to be written? And what was, say, the most passionate idea you said, I got to get this out there, and this is something I discovered?
Yes, I didn't really want to write it right now, this paper. I wanted to write another paper together with Andreas, by the way, about time-oriented software implementation, TOSI, as we call this approach. So that's the paper that I really wanted to write next as a 27th BetaCodex network paper. But then we kind of didn't get to it soon enough, Andreas. And I became anxious, with the work on TOS, that I learned a few things, and I thought, okay, at a certain point, I have to share this stuff. So there was this moment where I doubted, okay, should Andreas and I publish a TOSI paper first, or should there be another TOS paper or something entirely different? Ultimately, after a workshop in London that I did for a client about TOS, I started to put together a list of possible patterns, stuff that hadn't fit into the first research paper, stuff that we didn't know about at the time, stuff that I noticed during this kind of workshop in London. And that's how it happened. So I put together this paper very quickly, really, within 1 or 2 weeks, I think. And then for refinement, I sent it to a couple of people. You included Rijon to do corrections and so on. So I thought it just had to get out because, of course, the first research paper about TOST that Sebastian and I published in 2025, we had to keep it short. We had to keep it. We couldn't go into some of the practical problems yet because it didn't seem like the right time. We didn't have enough cases. We weren't so sure, from the case that we had with Pflaeging. We had some ideas about problems that would come up or questions that would come up, and it became clearer and clearer to me in the last couple of months. And Andreas, maybe you could add something about the paper. Your thoughts and thinking about it?
Yeah, I think, and also what I know from you, Niels, how this patterns, let's say, came to that paper, that there are also really quite a lot of that patterns where the actual things that you can only see if you actually see a TOS system live. Yeah.
Yes.
And that and also things that are from a conceptual point of view very clear. So that I would say, Niels, we never thought about that this could be a topic. For example, I just thought about that white space topic. Yeah. If you think in a time-oriented way, it's actually obvious how you handle that kind of white space. Yeah. But if you're starting then TOST as a new system and so on, you somehow maybe realize, okay, there's a strange way how people handle that white space. So white space, if they actually finish an item at 3 p.m., and then they maybe have 2 or 3 or whatever hours left. So what do they do? And then
they picked at Pflaeging. They picked other items. That's how I noticed that something was wrong. Yeah, that's how I came to realize this is a topic. Why are you picking another? How can you finish a new item if you take it on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? When will you will fuck up the timeline if it's a one day?
You've already spent your cognitive energy again for the first 5-6 hours of the day.
So it needed to be addressed. And one of the side effects of that was that then the conceptualizers, even the list owners, started to size items below the 1-day threshold. So some of the items were already conceptualized to be 2-hour items, 3-hour items, 4-hour items. So it became a mess, you know. And ultimately, when that happens, you go back to steering, you go back to capacity orientation and utilization thinking. So we had to drive that out, you know. And we had this conversation a couple of months ago at Pratke, where there were these agreements. Every item must be 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, nothing below the 1 day threshold. And you cannot, once you finish an item as a realizer, you cannot pick up another item on that day. It's forbidden. You protect this white space. Do whatever you want. Yeah, so that was an insight that I thought, okay, this might happen in other places too. Yeah, Andreas?
Yeah, and I think also this pattern with that white space is also combined to another topic that we also very often heard when we talk about TOS, that actually it's everything about getting more velocity. It's about more pressure, and we actually want to get more output. But actually, it's not. TOS is about just getting the things done and to have a kind of a smooth process, where is nothing like pressure or whatever, and therefore it's also very important to mention that and to highlight it. Okay, you can learn things, you can do other business work in that time, but you can also just go home earlier because your work is done for that day. And I think also from that perspective, it's very important to have that pattern in that paper. To make that clear again, because when you're and we are all kind of very much trained into think about that capacity thinking. It's the kind of a reflex. Okay, we have 3 hours left, let's slice an item into 3 hours and just do it, because then we have to fill the capacity. But that's not the thing we should do. The things we should do in TOS.
It's actually unethical to do that, because think of it. Sometimes to our audience, right? Sometimes working on an item will require more than 7, 8, or even 10 hours. So you have to do overtime to finish it in the day. If it's a 1 day item and you need more time, you might have to work until 8 in the evening, or maybe even 10, or until midnight or something, right? So that can happen. Voluntary overtime. Yeah, it happens. It will happen in the TOS system. So then why, if you are faster than expected, why would you not call it a day, as they say in English, right? Why shouldn't you stop working on development on items if you finish at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Of course, you should stop. You should take on another item to fill every day, to fill the max. You want to
fill the capacity. Fill the capacity.
Exactly, but we want capacity to swing according to demand. So if the demand on that day is for some reason the item is smaller, and also this kind of white space, people go home at 3 o'clock if they finish the item early, or they do some other thing, whatever they want to do. Once you have that, you also conceptualizers will learn, okay, maybe my items are too simple, or maybe the list owner learns that we can do things differently because our people with Claude are faster in doing certain things. So maybe we should do things differently. Maybe we can package items or slice them in a way different, so that there is a more that people do not finish all their items until midday, before lunch. So you need to get this kind of feedback from the process and this kind of learning. It's helpful, really, and it's what you want to see in TOS. You don't want people to develop more speed, velocity. We have to be faster. People must work all the. You have to give them. You have to punish them if they are not working, etc. That's not the idea of TOS. Smooth, regular flow, as Andreas just explained. You want to add something, Andreas, or did I say something foolish? Maybe.
No.
Well, I think this also comes down to the steering part too. Is that and I'm accountable to the boss, and if I don't get done, if I don't do more, faster, the boss is going to punish me. So I have to do it, as opposed to I'm done. I'm confident that this is done. My day is done. Maybe now I'll do some personal development. I'll get better at what I do, or that the individual is in control of how they get those daily portions done, and they are accountable to each other, with each other, for each other, talking to each other, getting stuff done. And it's not about the product owner or the oh gosh, what do they call it in Spotify? Like the squad lead or something like that. Now about them saying, hey, you gotta do more. You gotta get more done. Your velocity is down. Your personal velocity that we're measuring is down.
Exactly.
But there
shouldn't be any measure. Actually, at Pratke, we sometimes do this. We sometimes look at how many items did certain developers conclude. That's it. That's all the evaluation you need. In the last 3 months, how many items, and you discover that it's very different because people dedicate different amounts of time to development. Maybe
people have different masteries.
People have different masteries, and some take on items every day, and that's fine for them. Others have other roles on the side, and so they don't take on an item every day, etc., etc. So there are many factors, but you don't need to evaluate performance. You don't need the indicators, the sprint goals, etc., that you mentioned earlier, Ryan. There's nothing of that sort. You don't need any of those measures, lazy measures, as I like to call them.
Well, there's one goal. There's one goal. It is
get shit done.
Get shit done. Get the problem solved. Get through the list.
Sure.
There is a done for the list, and once we're done with the list, good on you.
We have the next. Then there is another list probably waiting, right? Mm-hmm. It won't end, very likely. Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
Andreas?
Yeah. I think actually the thing is that it's. Or I think what you have to understand is that if you have something like that TOS system, you get a kind of a constant, reliable output. Yeah. Yes. And we also call it flow. Yeah. So, and you exactly know how much of output you can expect every day. So that makes it from another perspective very easy, very predictable in that sense. And the output at the end will be higher in comparison to if you do this other shit, let's say it like that. Yeah. And I think that Y-space topic is a perfect example where the thinking that we are all used to, okay, we have to really use every capacity because otherwise other competitors or whatever, they will use it and they will be better. Yeah, but I think actually, if you think about the reality and see in reality in organizations, the reason why some companies are faster or faster in the markets is not about who is, let's say, pushing the people working there harder. That's never the reason. Yeah, at least on a long term.
Yes,
that will work for some time maybe, but on long term it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Some other new things that came up for me in my review of the paper was this idea of brushing the hair of the list. That the list is that there was the brushing of the hair, and then there's the drying rack of the list, and there's these different metaphors. I'm thinking a list is like beautiful hair. You keep it brushed, you keep it well cared for, and you don't let it grow to the floor because it's going to get frayed. You're going to look bad. I mean, there's no pride. There's no honor. What do you care about what you look like? I care as the list owner about the health of this list. I want it to be healthy. I want it to be well cared for. And okay, this is my haircut. I've got my haircut, and I keep it clean, keep it well cared for. And it's different than backlog grooming, and that's because the backlog. My hair is growing down to my feet. I need to brush everything down to my feet and take care of that's. Maybe I'm a little bit off the mark on that metaphor, but
we should first agree that every metaphor has its limits. So when we say a list is like beautiful long hair, you have to comb it every day. There is also long, beautiful hair that's dreadlocks, and they cannot be combed every day, but they can still be beautiful. So this is not a dismissive metaphor about Jamaican hairstyle or whatever. It's just a metaphor that that I think makes sense. Think of long, beautiful hair. You have to comb it every day. That's the idea. You have to curate it, and dreadlocks need to be curated in a different way. Or we couldn't pack that into the same metaphor, into the same paper, of course. Yeah.
Well,
yes.
The other metaphor was the drying rack.
But let's stick with the list curation. There is one of the difference between a backlog is it's really not long hair. It's more like a garbage dump. So as it doesn't end, you put things on it, and nobody can comb it. Not a single person, and even less so a product owner or who's responsible for the list in Scrum. Usually a product owner, or in Scrum alike. It's usually the product owner who usually doesn't have the mastery to qualify. Is this a good? Does this make sense? Doesn't it? What should be done? What shouldn't be done? So it's really a lot less qualified. A backlog is not about a single problem. Usually, it never ends, so it becomes the garbage dump. The person who curates it is not really a capable curator, doesn't have the mastery to curate it. So a list is really very, very different in substance from the garbage dump, right? And Andreas, you haven't. I see you thinking.
I think when you think about the comparison also to backlogs or whatever, I think that that metaphor with that hair is also okay. It's something that is kind of belonging to the list owner, and if you think about a backlog, the one thing is in theory, you have a clear responsible role for it and whatever, but in reality, you see everybody is throwing everything inside a backlog. People are splitting up items because it makes sense. People are adding items, or in that case, user stories and things like that. And I think in that clear problem-oriented and clear responsibility and ownership of that list owner, it's a kind also of that personal honor. Okay, that's my list, and it needs to be clean and in a good shape.
Yes.
And that is also, I think, a perspective of that pattern. That is, it's not a kind of a thing that you just create one time and then you throw it somewhere and then, okay, it will be done. No, you have to take care of it every day. Because things are changing. You maybe need to add things. You maybe realize I have to split up things. Maybe you also have to think about, okay, what kind of dependencies do I have? What do we have to do before? Also from a technical point of view, because maybe we need to develop things that we can base on that for other development work. Everything is part of that list curation, on that job.
And also the list owner must have a certain view of the balance between conceptualization and realizations, that the flow doesn't get lost. So it's about, talking to realizers and conceptualizers and reassigning. Some people will be conceptualizers and realizers, and sometimes they should do more realization or conceptualization to maintain flow, etc., right? And in a way, the list owner is also the person who's working on the capacity, letting the capacity swing for the list.
Well, all of this is about ownership and what actual ownership means. It is not a product owner can be just a name, just a title. The paper talks about all the titles that just need to be jettisoned. But this idea of we got a list and I own it, I care about it. It is mine. I am accountable and responsible for it. And that is different. And
I think also one thing is very important. List owner is a role. It's not a job description. And when you would ever see somewhere in the world a kind of a job description where organizations are searching for a list owner, they are definitely not doing TOST.
It wouldn't be TOST.
Because it's a role, and it also could be, or it is a temporary role for that list. And if that list is done, that role is not required for that list. And it's not a kind of a law that the same person then needs to be a owner of another list, because maybe he's just, or she is just a good conceptualizer or realizer or both or whatever. And I think that is also very important that we also talk about that it's a role topic and not a job description, because that is somehow also a natural thing. And I think originally in the agile world, the idea was the same. but where the first company started to search for a product owner, okay, there's something wrong.
Just ends up being an executive. Dr.
I remember that period, yes, when companies started to turn product owner into a job description, and that was one of the command and control in Agile. Right?
Well, we didn't want to fire all the business analysts, so you made all the business analysts product owners without any. You changed their job description, their job title. You give them zero empowerment, but again, we're talking steering and command control with that. So Dr. M's question, I interpreted this as what do you when you have conflicts between list owners? I think that
unthinkable. Unthinkable.
Why is it unthinkable? Help Dr. M in this case.
It's a beautiful question, by the way. It's a beautiful question. Maybe Andreas should go first.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, okay, what could be a kind of a conflict between two list owners?
Yeah, because they have their own lists, which mean problems and projects that are different, right? What conflicts could they have about capacity, maybe?
Yeah, about capacity, yeah.
So who is how many conceptualizers and realizers do I have on my list? How many conceptualizers and realizers does she have on her list? That could be a conflict potentially. Yes. But that's not tossed. In tossed, maybe, Andreas, you can spit out an answer, but I have one, I think, that is in a tossed, in any time-oriented system. That's something that we learned from the unique Ernst Weichselbaum, who we will talk about a little bit more in the next episode, together with Andreas again, right? And Ernst Weichselbaum came up with this idea that capacity isn't fixed, capacity swings, and it must swing, and we need to make it swing. So in that thinking, you do not, this is not a department, it's not an area, it's not a power, there's no power game, much to the contrary. List owners will think among themselves where they need the capacity. For example, do I need it more in conceptualization, more in realization? Should we move a developer who struggles with the technicalities of my list and move her or him to another list where that person can do better or more work? That kind of contemplation will happen all the time. I see it happen at Pratke, and I cannot imagine if there should be conflict, the whole system would be broken already. Andreas, maybe you have a better answer to that.
No, but I think there's also a second or another pattern I want to mention in that is related to that question from my point of view, is that drying rack.
Yes, topic. The list drying rack.
The list drying rack
from the research paper as well. Mm-hmm. Yes,
because these kind of conflicts that during you were just talking, I just thought about, okay, when do we really have that conflict? Okay, assuming we have too much list open to the given capacity in an organization, then you definitely will have that problem. But that is what we addressed with that list drying rack pattern, that you only can use the free slots on the drying rack. You cannot put more on the drying rack than that the capacity of it can take. And if you have the need as an organization and you think about, okay, from an perspective, we need to have an additional list because we need to get that shit done. You have to think about how we can prepare the capacity for it. There's also another pattern in the paper where it mentioned, and where we mentioned that it's easy also to sell or onboard additional capacity in that time-oriented system. It's a lot more easy also from an organizational point of view, and also from the financial point of view, how you can onboard additional freelancer or whatever capacity. So that would also be a part of the answer. So if you see that you get this kind of conflicts as a responsible manager or whatever in an organization, you should think about, okay, maybe we have too much open lists. Is that really fitting to the capacity?
Yes,
do we have to add
lists work on at any given point of time? This relates to a lean principle as well. I mean, the concept of the list drying rack comes from Ernst Weichselbaum, is inspired by Ernst Weichselbaum, who we will talk about in the next episode. And it also applies a principle that's well known in lean, that is start later to finish earlier. So reduce, it's the Kanban principle, limit work in progress so that you can start later and finish earlier, that lead times shrink, you deliver faster, but you work on less work at any given time. That's one of the ideas behind the list drawing recs, and limiting the amount of open lists. And if you should have conflicts around capacity, that certainly would mean that you have too many open lists, too many lists you're working upon, and you shouldn't have that. Yeah, you should always think, okay, can we really have so many lists at any given point of time that we will be working? Yeah, brilliant topic. Thanks, Dr. M. Wonderful topic.
We got another one for you. Another one that came in the paper that I didn't see before. And that was strategy. Talking about that strategy is in other ways of developing software. It's like the software development folks they just do their thing, that they serve us. They don't need to be involved in the strategy of what the company is becoming. That's different in TOST. And I'd like to hear a little bit about how that's different and why that's important for what we talk about. Either of you, feel free to put the strategy thing out there.
Yeah, Andreas, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So I think one thing is that we just talked about the lists and how many lists you can have open, and you need a really problem for it. And just in that process, when you discuss inside the organization, maybe we should create here a new list, or we need that new list to solve that actual problem. It's a kind of a strategic decision. Do we do it or not? Do we do now or later or whatever? That's where already a kind of a strategic point of view is included. And again, that's not something where one person sits at this desk and said, okay, now we do it. Yeah. So you have to talk to others, again, TTEO, to discuss all these different perspectives. Is it now the right time? Yeah, okay, maybe we have just closed the list and now we can create a new one. But which of the problems? And to be honest, every organization typically have more problems to solve than they actually can do. So it's always a kind of strategic decisions. Okay, which is the next problem we want to get solved? That's maybe one part of the answer. Maybe Niels, you can. Take over.
I didn't discover this as a problem, but I saw in one of my TOST workshops, the question came up, and so what about strategy? If we have this TOST thing, how do we solve strategy? I just noticed, okay, this is an issue, right, to clarify. And of course, the answer I gave, I'm not sure if I gave it well, but in that moment I said, what more do you want to have strategically than debating the lists and deciding when to go live with the list and how long is a list drawing record? That is strategy. You don't need more strategy. Of course, that person didn't believe it at the time, but we will get back to it. It needs to be clarified, that strategy is where the lists live. Yeah. And that it is a pattern that will come up in every organization. I mean, every organization that has dabbled with strategic management or with scaling or portfolio management, this question will come up. And so how about strategy? And of course, strategy is supposed to be a hierarchical thing, but TOST doesn't solve problems hierarchically. The idea is that who is the person with mastery to take on the list? Do we have this person? Do we have the resources to have that additional list? Or is our list drawing rec too small to open that list anytime soon? When do we finalize our list number 3 that we have there? When does it get exhausted so that we can close it, so that we can open another list, and so on and so on? And where should the capacity go? Should we move capacity now? All these questions are totally, utterly strategic. So there's no reason to have more, and it scales, because if you have 17 lists, it's just the same process, really. It doesn't change anything, compared to a smaller company having 1 or 2 lists at any given time. Or you could have 100 lists and maybe 1,000 developers. It would still be the same system. No scaling and no conferences required to coordinate this, or no planning process required to coordinate this. It can self-coordinate because, of course, list owners can talk to each other, right?
God forbid.
No, they need to TTEO as well. Everybody needs to TTEO.
They're too good to talk to those folks in the who are behind the door. You just shove two pizza boxes under the door and just be done.
Describe agile. People are too good to talk to each other.
Oh my goodness. We've been here for a lovely time. We've got another episode coming up in a couple weeks. We get that on the schedule about Schlegel.
We tried to tease people into reading the paper, basically, right? I think we covered a lot of items, not all of them. In the paper. Andreas, do you have a favorite pattern that you want to mention that we might have skipped in our discussion?
I just a little bit read in parallel some messages in the chat, and there also were some AI-related topics, and I just thought about, okay, maybe as this is really a big thing at the moment, and it's also something where I think from our perspective, Toast is a very good fit to AI-supported software development. Maybe this can also be a kind of a future topic. For that podcast that we just were focusing about that AI topic, because from our point of view, Toast is the perfect fit, and maybe also more, it's a kind of from our point of view, a kind of a need to change the organization to actually being able to get the really things out of AI. I think we also have a kind of experience and also a strong opinion about the AI usage in Toast.
Yes.
So
it could be a separate topic for a separate session. We should mention that in the paper there are at least 2 items that are directly related to AI, and we should mention that the key of our belief system is that if you want to use AI cleverly and properly in software development, then it helps to make items small and to distinguish between conceptualization and realization, because it makes the work, how to say it, right? How to put it? How does it make the work? It makes the work. It avoids that you spiral out of control in software development.
Yeah, and it's actually also reflecting. Yeah, and it's even from my point of view, the Toast system is also already reflecting the way how you should use AI tools in software development, because you actually have to do a concept before you actually just start vibe coding. I would say especially everybody who is really working with AI professionally in software development is doing similar things. And I think it will be also, and you already see it, the thing that you will have also different kinds of AI models and so on that are specialized and trained for different jobs to do. And at the moment there's so much change and dynamic and whatever. Every second day a new model is released from a different company, and there you also need a system where you can really also take these things that are coming every day, let's say almost on a daily basis. There are changes and you have to rethink your process. Can I use the same tool the same way? And again, their Toast is really helpful. And also, Niels, you mentioned a very important point, is that you have to have small pieces to really get good results at the moment, at least. And therefore it's also very good.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about AI, you need to have a human who has a bullshit detector to give prompts to these things. And at every layer, at every talk to each other layer, there's the talking to myself and doing the critical thinking. Oh, these things can actually help me think better if I know what I'm talking about, if I'm asking the right questions, so I'm prompting the right ways, and not just shoving some awful prompt into several agents and have them go off and to create shoddy software. It's only as good, the product coming out is only as good as the thinking going in. And that I think it is tailor-made for the large language models and
I yesterday came up. Okay, I didn't come up with it. I thought that in the future we will probably see something like an AI proletariat and people with mastery using AI properly, and the proletariat will probably use ChatGPT and the likes. With a lot of ads on them and feel very powerful, but the real work will be done by people, secretly, people with high mastery, secretly, doing very fancy stuff that they wouldn't be able to do without the AI, not necessarily producing code. And this is very important, right? AI can be used in so many powerful ways without producing code. It can also be used to produce code, but you need a high level of mastery and conceptualization and/or realization. It's a fantastic topic for another. Maybe Andreas, we can set up this session as well about task and AI. Yeah, we would like that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
However,
it's a topic of the moment. So.
However, next time we will talk about what would Ernst Weichselbaum do, the new book with quotes of the legendary Ernst Weichselbaum, the Austrian Deming, and you will be back for that too, because you, as I myself, Andreas, are a connoisseur, an expert on all things Weichselbaum's system. We worked with the guy. You met him a couple of times as well. So yeah, I think this trio will reunite in the next. I hope you like this session because this trio will reunite in the next session to discuss the Weichselbaum book. Yeah.
Indeed, absolutely. I was trying to get the graphic that we already have created because I made a mistake and I said this episode was going to be the Weichselbaum episode, but yes. Either way. All right, friends, this has been real and it has been fun. It has been real fun. So thanks both of you for your engaging and lively content and conversation. And thanks to those of you who watched out there, especially Dr. M.
Yes, thank you, Dr. M.
And there's a gentleman named Jackson on the YouTube channel. Jackson, some great questions. We were able to go back and forth.
Okay.
More to come. Be well and do some great work.